Overall, workplaces in this province have gotten much safer over the years. But that's truer about some than others. Those in the trades and construction industry still face many dangerous conditions and substances, and not just from the kinds of injuries you might expect. Cancers from carcinogens on the job are a real risk. Joining us now for more, Paul Demers. He is Director, Cancer Care Ontario's Occupational Cancer Research Centre. Valerie Wolf, Executive Director, Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers, the Hamilton location. And Carmen Tiano, Director of Occupational Health Services, the Provincial Building and Construction Trades Council of Ontario. Happy to have you three around this table tonight for an important discussion about what's going on in some of the workplaces of this province. And to set up our conversation, Sheldon, if you would, bring up this graphic and let's set the table for the discussion to come. Asbestos, still around, causes an estimated 630 lung cancers in Ontario every year. Silica dust, which is found in concrete and drywall, causes an estimated 200 work-related lung cancer cases each year. An estimated 142,000 Ontario workers are exposed. Exposure to diesel exhaust accounts for an estimated 170 lung cancer cases and 45 bladder cancer cases each year. Solar radiation causes an estimated 1,400 non-melanoma skin cancer cases each year, with those, of course, in the construction and agricultural industries the most at risk. Okay, let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. Paul, asbestos has been banned. Why are we still hearing about asbestos-related ill health effects?
Well, asbestos, we hope, will be banned a little later this year. A lot of people hear about asbestos. They think it has been banned for a long time in Canada, but
that's
in fact,
not the case, eh?
No, unfortunately, Canada, was for many decades the world's largest producer of one type of asbestos, chrysotile asbestos. We used a lot of it. We started decreasing our use as early as the 1970s, but we really just stopped mining asbestos in Canada about 5-6 years ago. So it still remains a pretty big issue for us. But part of the issue is that asbestos, it's not just when you mine it, it's just not just when it comes out of the factory. It goes into homes, it goes into our hospitals, our schools.
Still?
Now,
Still there.
Now it's going to be stopping, but it remains there.
Right, it's in the buildings.
It's in those buildings.
So does the ban that you anticipate coming later this year, does that involve ripping it out of existing buildings?
No, what it's going to do is stop any new uses. And this is one of the challenges. It's an important step. It's one that's long overdue, and we're very happy it's going to happen. But we're going to have asbestos with us for decades to come, and cancer takes many decades to develop. So the rates of mesothelioma, a rare cancer, relatively rare cancer caused really only by asbestos, that's the only well-established cause. It's still on the rise within Canada, even though we started decreasing our use of asbestos back in the 1970s.
So Valerie, what are the implications of, okay, I get we're not going to mine it anymore, we're not going to build new buildings with it. What are the implications of still having it in as many buildings as it's in?
Well, it just means that it has to be managed in place, and the big risks are whenever it's disturbed. And sometimes it's disturbed. There's legislation about doing so in a controlled manner that eliminates exposure. But sometimes things are disturbed by a basketball or by some other traumatic event to the building or to the premises, and then you have a release that's not controlled, and exposure can still happen.
And you probably can't tell if it's been released, right?
Well, not always.
Not
You're
always,
right.
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, because the fibers themselves that are of concern are invisible, which doesn't mean that there isn't dirt or other things that you would be able to see in the process. But yeah, the hazardous fibers are not visible. So yeah, it will be. And I mean, asbestos was put in the best buildings. It was actually the best product at the time that for soundproofing and fireproofing especially. So it's in our public buildings because it was the most protective that it could be. And now we have the challenge of continuing to protect those public buildings that require protection and removing that hazard eventually.
Carmine, we have known about asbestos for decades though, right? So this should not be news.
Well, it's not really decades. I mean, back to the 1930s, in certain tyrannical regimes in Europe, there was whole standards on asbestos and silica dusts. I think what's happened in Canada is what Paul was talking about. We were one of the biggest exporters. At the same time, that industry was responsible for creating a lot of the junk science that went into asbestos. There's evidence that McGill University, which a lot of the research was funded by the asbestos industry, had basically made comments like asbestos workers have less cancer than the general population. But interesting on that, in the 1960s, then the work of famous doctor, Dr. Irvin Selikoff in Mount Sinai, New York, came back and said, hold on, a lot of this research doesn't make sense. My research is saying that these workers in the industry and outside of the industry have higher instances of cancers. Then it started to happen.
Which is, the latter one is the truth, right?
100%.
Of course, yeah.
I would almost argue that the asbestos industry was the beginning of creating the junk science. We know what the tobacco industry did. I would argue that it was the asbestos industry in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s that created a lot of the junk science.
Now, if you, Valerie, wear a mask, if you have exposure as a worker to this stuff, does that get the job done?
Not really, no. Because I mean, you can wear a mask to protect you, but you need to have, the way asbestos work is done is under negative pressure, so it has to be a specialized ventilation system, so that, and then filtered by a HEPA filter. So the mask is like insurance, but it's not sufficient protection by itself. And in fact, for asbestos work to be done, people have to shower in and shower out as well, because the fibers otherwise become attached to clothing.
Right.
And then there are what are called secondary exposure cases, even allowed by WSIB occasionally, of spouses who have become had their health affected by the asbestos that was brought home.
By secondhand exposure?
By
Oh, my goodness.
secondary
Okay.
exposure.
What about silica dust? What does that actually do to you if you inhale that?
It's an inhaled dust that causes diseases, respiratory diseases up to and including lung cancer. But silicosis is even more common. It affects even more people. So there's, I guess, degrees of severity, but none of it's good, I guess I would say.
Paul, am I hearing this right? Diesel fumes? People are getting in trouble now with diesel fumes?
Yeah,
Explain that.
well, I mean, diesel exhaust has long been suspected as a cause of cancer. There's been research, but more definitive research was done in the last 10 years, and it's now been classified as a definite human carcinogen. And that's big because a lot of people are exposed to diesel. Now, especially at work where the levels are much higher than you might experience on the street, but even as an environmental concern, it's of concern.
Are you talking about underground garages, that kind of thing?
Underground garages, mining, construction where that happens below grade, or sometimes you see buildings in the winter where they've kind of wrapped them up to try to keep the wind out of them. Well, then if a vehicle operates within that, again, diesel exhaust can build in. We have no idling rules that are certainly not always followed. And my office looks across the street at a hospital, and still I see, trucks idling outside with diesel trucks.
Now that is ironic. They're outside a hospital with the engine idling when there are plainly rules in place to prevent that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's not good.
I think there's not enough consciousness about really the health effects. It's been with us for a long time, and we have to constantly remind people that this is a serious issue, and we have to introduce more enforcement.
Carmen, what about if you live near a construction site or you're passing by a construction site and there's diesel exhaust as a part of all of that? Are you in any jeopardy under those circumstances?
I think the biggest problem would be not the bystander, because you're not actually be in the vicinity of the exposure. It's the actual worker, I think, that's more exposed. Now, could there be exposure to the general population? Yes, but the biggest problem is the actual worker in the vicinity of that equipment. That is something that, again, I don't think any employer in the province wakes up in the morning and says, hey, today I'm going to expose anybody. But I think that what does happen is, as you start the construction project, the best laid plans as a result of circumstances that happen sometimes are just put aside. Think of it this way. In construction, we still have a problem with workers falling from heights. We still have a problem of workers being struck by and killed by struck-bys. So now, can you imagine that we're saying, okay, deal with the factors that you know, that you see. Now we're telling them to deal with things like diesel or asbestos, silica, that's not out there.
That they can't see.
They can't see. So I think what needs to happen is we need to be re-looking at the way the whole idea of work is structured in construction.
Well, hold off on that. We're going to get to that in
Sure.
a second.
Yes.
Because I still want to, if we remember our original checklist,
Yes.
we've got to get to solar exposure.
That's
So
another
that's
one.
the next thing on the list. What are you telling people to do in order to reduce, you know, as we suggested, agricultural workers, construction workers, outdoors, all day long, you know, hot sun in the summertime, not a factor these days, but what are you telling? Soon we hope.
Yeah.
What are you telling people they got to do?
We're telling them, as is referred to in the Burden of Cancer report, that you need to protect workers. When work is to be done outdoors, there needs to be a plan around the hazards of the sun, so that it's a carcinogen, the solar radiation, and there needs to be a plan to protect people. And it's not to protect the people at the individual, it's to create shade, basically, or to manage the work in ways that people aren't working between the peak times of 11 to 3, manage the work so that any work that can be done indoors is done indoors, manage the work so that there's rotation of staffing, so not the same person out there for 8 hours, but somebody for 2 hours, somebody for 2 hours, somebody for 2 hours, things like that. There's lots of different ways that you can minimize exposure to sun.
You know, Paul, Major League Baseball is getting hip to this as well. I've noticed there's been a campaign the last couple of years to get ball players to put on sunscreen, which, you know, you would think is obvious. But are we talking about anything more than putting on sunscreen? Are you talking about erecting tents on construction sites, or what's involved here?
You know, putting on sunscreen, you'd have to be constantly doing it if you're working outside.
So it's more than that.
The more, you know, it's more effective than that to put on protective clothing. I mean, ball players, they wear a cap with a visor for a reason. You don't see them, you know, out there in muscle shirts. I mean, they've got uniforms that cover a lot of their skin. That is necessary to be done. But providing shade is another very key component. Even doing something as simple as providing a shaded place so that workers during lunch hours and breaks can get out of the sun and not always be sitting in the sun when there's an opportunity, even that can have a positive effect in reducing their levels of sun exposure.
Okay, I don't want to indulge too much in cliches here, but you know, there is the odd construction worker who doesn't mind wearing a very tight T-shirt to show the abs and the muscles and that kind of thing. Do you have to change the mindset of that person?
100%. I mean, in any strategy you put in place, you can't say, okay, well, we're going to do legislative. We're gonna put parameters for employers. Of course, it's going to be a mindset for the individual worker. It only makes sense. That's how you get some synergy to things to start working. So 100%. Now, the labor unions, the building trades unions have, when we're doing our training, we do tell our workers what the potential exposures are and what measures they put in place. But we have to do a better job at it, like everybody else.
I mean, this is a perennial question, but Paul, let's tackle this anyway. We hear all the time that, of course, stress is a big factor in weakening the immune system, which could possibly make somebody more susceptible to cancer. So how are we able to distinguish the kind of cancer that a worker might pick up for all of the reasons we've talked about so far in this conversation versus all the other reasons people get cancer?
Well, you know, a lot of what we know about things that causes cancer actually comes from studies of people working. Roughly half of the things that have been classified as known or suspected carcinogens by the World Health Organization are because of studies of workers. And that's because people who work are exposed at 10, 100, 1,000 times the level of the general population for some of these things, like asbestos and diesel exhaust and silica. So in the studies that we do, they're often a group that has been the most informative for us in knowing what causes cancer, not just at work, but in the environment, because the levels experienced at work are that much higher.
Okay, but Valerie, I'm going to go at this again. How do you know that the worker who gets lung cancer got it from exposure to asbestos as opposed to His wife smokes 2 packs a day, and he's exposed to secondhand smoke, morning and noon and night.
Well, part of the work that gets done to work up a file so that's part of what our organization does is provide scientific and medical reports about work relatedness, and so that's exactly, they would take a detailed history of lifestyle, which and of not genetics, but a family, any other family with cancer, but also it's characterizing what their dose, a lifetime dose of other carcinogens might be in their work. So taking a detailed work history and then using research and knowledge that our staff have gained over the years to understand what the exposures were, and then you can make a mathematical case for an elevation that even despite exposure to secondhand smoke, that asbestos, for instance, is synergistic with smoking. Yes. So that means it actually it's a multiplicative effect, and you can make the case, or else you can just make the case that they may both have been a factor, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some risk was supplied by the workplace, and it should be recognized.
Let me ask you about construction sites.
Sure.
Is there much work being done on construction sites where there are regulations to keep workers safe but are not being adhered to?
Well, the occupational exposure limits just came into place, I believe, in 2017 or 2016. Prior to that, every other worker in the province of Ontario was subject to occupational exposure limits. Construction wasn't. But on that, what was interesting is that the employer lobby and the worker lobby got together to try to get those in there. We're trying. But I think what is going to happen is once an asbestos ban comes in, there'll be more discussion, and disease will just become part of an employer's overall safety plan, and we'll start doing it. But right now, I would love to say that it's starting to happen 100%. It's going to be an evolution to get in there. But again, it's like when we started talking about changing the way we do work, practices of work. It's going to be a mindset change.
Do you think there's a lot of people in this province who are desperate to work, even though the unemployment rate overall is very low?
Yes.
Relatively speaking, there are people who are desperate for jobs. Do you think they are agreeing to work on unsafe work sites because of that?
100%. The example I heard a couple of years ago, and we've had the discussion on asbestos. I was traveling up in Northern Ontario, and someone told me that there was a contractor that was doing a renovation on a fairly large building. It was a non-union job, but that doesn't really have anything to do with this. That he went out, used a temp agency, got some workers to come in, rip out some of the walls that contain asbestos, expose these workers without even knowing that these workers were exposed.
Did they have masks, gloves, anything like that? Who knows?
The problem with asbestos is you can put a mask on because the smaller the fiber, the more dangerous it is to you. So, to your point, are workers gonna do the work knowing that they're being exposed? Yes, the economic reality, that's the way it is. But again, once there is more protections put in place, a media campaign, it'll get people to know what their rights are, and I think that'll start it.
I presume all of you are wishing for a world where essentially you're all out of business as it relates to
That is absolutely true.
occupational health and safety.
We've always wanted to put ourselves out of business.
You would
yeah.
love every workplace to be
Yeah.
safe and nobody to get cancer, and
Yeah.
happily we go along. Can we go ahead?
On that point, what's interesting, sometimes at the building trades, I get phone calls from families. Carmen, my late father died of, she's trying to explain it to me, and I go, oh, mesothelioma, yeah. So I put the claim in, the claim goes through. A week later, 2 weeks later, or even months later when the claim is accepted, I either get a phone call or I get a card from the family thanking me. That family shouldn't be thanking me. That family should be saying, well, Carmen, you work for a sophisticated organization, you have all these resources at your disposal, and people are getting sick. Those are the worst type of thank yous that I get because the worker's dead. What did I really do? I got him compensation. They still lost a brother or a father. So yes, I wish there's a time when my job is obsolete.
Well, how far away, Paul, are we from a time where the workplaces of this province are going to be free from this kind of risk?
Well, I think we're still a ways away from it, but I have to say that things are changing. There is an occupational disease action plan that was started in the province. Valerie's very involved in it, but they pulled in a lot of people from the health and safety community to try to do that. So I feel like, in fact, there's more recognition now of these risks to things like carcinogens than there's ever been in Ontario. And we still have to move that into action further, but I do feel like we're making progress on that.
Well, let's
but it's
pursue
something
that.
that takes a long time.
Sure, let's pursue that. What do we need to be doing more of right now?
Well, I mean, the priorities of the Sock Disease Action Plan, the idea of it actually was to try and focus our energies to make a meaningful difference. And part of that is not to deal with it as an iceberg that's, oh my goodness, how can we prevent or protect people from all these things that can harm them? It's to identify, because of need and the potential for impact, some priorities. So, but one of the main priorities, which is basically what this program is amazing for, is to raise awareness about occupational disease as a health risk, and as because we don't want people to not be safe anymore. Safety is still critical every day when people go to work, that they need to be safe. But we also want them to think that the long-term health implications, I guess, as I was thinking of it in the shower, as I do, have my great ideas, is that people have the right to go home from work, but people also have the right to retire in good health, and they have the right to retire able to hear their grandchildren and able to do all the things that they spent their whole working life hoping to do. And if we don't pay attention to exposures that can cause occupational disease, then people can't enjoy their retirement.
Carmen, my assumption is that new immigrants to Canada, that people who don't speak English very well, would be the most vulnerable in this kind of a situation. Is that fair to say?
100%. I mean, I go back to the way it was. Sometimes we don't learn from history, we keep repeating it. If you think about it, any immigrant groups come to Canada in the 50s and the 60s, they're the ones that were always exposed to the greatest hazards. You look at the Italian, my heritage is Italian, Hogs Hollow tragedy. You get these workers, you pick them up at the corner of St. Clair and Dufferin, put them in a pickup truck, bring them to a construction site somewhere in northern Toronto or somewhere. Those workers were being exposed to hazards that were horrible, and we're doing the same thing now. So I think that any strategy needs to start with a media strategy, just simply telling workers what their rights are. Here are the exposures that you could potentially have at work. And then from there, you move on to the legislative part. Then after you do the legislative part, you start doing the entitlement part. And then you start looking at the research. So it's not one action, it's multiple actions that somehow start to put together a puzzle.
I do need to actually ask you in our last half minute here, because I'm not sure I know what you're referring to. Hogs Hollow is a part of North Toronto, which is kind of a fancy part of town. But is there a particular tragedy that happened you're referring to? Back
in the 1960s, mid-1960s, there was immigrant workers that were tunneling under Hogs Hollow, and there was a disaster. These workers died. And as a result of these workers dying, the impetus to start looking at health and safety started to happen. But that's what we do. Anytime there's a tragedy, we're going to do a commission. We're going to start investigating it. But why do we have to wait till the workers die? Why do we have to wait till those workers become on a statistic that you read off? Yeah. That's ridiculous. You wouldn't do that in your home, but we do that when it comes to occupational health and safety. So maybe, like I said, the biggest thing is to have a whole mindset the way we look at it. And I think Val and Paul's research probably are leading to that type of idea.
I did not know about that incident, so I'm glad to know about it now. And I thank all three of you for participating in our program tonight. Carmen Tiano from the Ontario Building Trades, Valerie Wolf, Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers, she's out of the Hamilton branch, and Paul DeBears, Occupational Cancer Research Centre, based in Cancer Care, Ontario. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.